Hi everybody! Today we're going over character design and pixel art. My name's Summer, I'm the Art Workshop JO this year, and I'm doing the character design portion of the workshop first. So if you could scan the QR code and log in just so we can keep track of the people that are here, that would be super awesome, so go ahead and do that. Yeah, woo in the chat. Yep. Very hype. All right. Did it work? Oh, you didn't scan the QR code? Okay, I'm going back. Get the QR code. It's important. Okay. Everyone scan? We're good? All right. Do you want to do this part or do you want me to do it?
Okay, so before we start, we're going to go over what our workshops it is. If it is your first time here, our art workshops provide intro-friendly courses to creating art for video games. We have software tutorials for beginners. We are doing 2D in the fall, and it is almost like we are basically done with our 2D semester. But in the spring, we are doing a 3D track. So if you guys want to join us for that, we have that for a bit available, basically. Yeah, this is basically a space for one-on-one help with artistic growth. And we also just are a community of artists that are trying to help each other. If you guys want updates on like releasing of slideshows and content that we send out, make sure you guys have access to the Art Workshop Discord channel in our EGAT server. All right. Other than that, go ahead.
Okay, let's talk about character design. So first of all, what is character design? So the idea of character design is developing a character's overall visual appearance, behavior, and aesthetic in order to tell a story. That's something that's extremely important in game design because in game design, you need a recognizable character that's going to sell your idea and your game and your brand. All of the biggest games have recognizable characters. It's something that's really important to the game's identity. So being able to know what makes a character design good or effective is really important. I have linked on this slide a really valuable resource. There's this website called Character Design References, and it has just this massive compiled, it's like all of these different character designs that you can access. So that's great if you just need a resource for looking at all different types of character designs. So, what is good in a character design? What makes a character design good? Because we all have different favorite characters. There's not one character that's the best character. But in general, broadly, a good character is one that is appealing, memorable, and communicates their story through their design. A successful character will visually tell you who they are. And side note, appealing doesn't mean the character is traditionally attractive, it just means their design is interesting to look at without being too busy or planned. Their design is effective for who they are. So again, we're trying to be appealing, memorable, and communicate our character's story. So how can we achieve all three of these things? Through shape language, color palette, and silhouette. Those are the core mechanics of any good character design. So let's talk about what those are. First one, shape language. It's the idea that successful character designs are based on recognizable shapes. Now remember, we're telling a story, so we're using these shapes and the ideas that we associate with them to tell that story through our character design. So I have some shape silhouettes of characters on the right. So can you make assumptions about any of those characters based on that silhouette, just on how they look based on shape? Yep, that's what we're doing. That's character design. So I'm asking for a response. I'm gonna be one of those people. Okay, go.
The one on the left, they're probably an artist because they have a brush-shaped
Mm-hmm. So they're telling you just through the shape of that, they're like, okay, that's a brush. That character has a story. So that, I would say that's like a story element. But what about the personalities? Like, what kind of personality do we think those characters might have? Yeah, yeah, the triangle one looks conniving. That's important. Triangles are like that. Yep. In the chat, we have the middle guy looks uptight. So I'd say that we can see a lot in the posture. That posture looks uptight. Yeah. So these shapes are actually, there's like a universal association that people will have with certain types of shapes. So let's talk about how we can use that to our advantage. So the three most basic shapes are circles, squares, and triangles. Character designs are going to generally employ a mix of these to tell you things about the character. So you can see here how a professional character artist might use different types of shapes in combination to make a character design. So here are some different characters with different shapes making up their design. So let's talk about circles. How do these circles make you feel? How do circles make you feel? Pretty good. Yeah, good. They're round. Yeah, they're friendly. They're nice to look at. Yeah, so that's right. Characters in general have an association with something that is soft, harmless, friendly, happy, changeable. Characters that are round are the friendly guy, the nice guy. And of course, you can subvert that. You can have a character that's a circle because they're kind of like bumbling or a fool, or because they're actually like a wolf in sheep's clothing and they just put on an act, that kind of thing. But in general, it's going to be like a friendly, warm association. Like think about Mickey Mouse. He's just made up of circles. Squares. How do squares make you feel?
Rigid.
Rigid? Yeah, they're rigid. They're really like a strong, stable, grounded. Yeah, definitely grounded. So, all of those. Yeah, strong and rigid in chat. Absolutely. Thank you, Rylan. Okay, so
Still my answers.
yeah, stealing your answers. So, common associations with squares are that they're reliable, sturdy, strong, stable, or stubborn. So, a square in a character design shows that that character is, set in their ways, strong, difficult to move, all the things that you might associate with a square. Triangles, last one. How do triangles make you feel? They're pointy. Yeah, they're sharp. They're edgy. Dangerous, maybe. So all those things are things that we associate with triangular characters. So yeah, they're tricky, clever, dangerous, unpredictable, dynamic, and they're often used for villainous characters, but I think it's important to know that they're not always evil. If your character is triangular, that doesn't mean that they're a terrible person by default. That's just those types of traits are usually associated with villainous characters, like being clever or plotting and that kind of thing. So now moving on to color theory. In color theory, we're going to talk about color palettes and color meanings and associations. Obviously, with color theory, there's all of this stuff that you can get into in art on how colors make each other look and that kind of thing, but we're going to talk about it more in the context of character design specifically. So with color palettes, we're going to talk about how you can make colors harmonious together. And with color meanings and associations, we're going to talk about how you can use them to continue to tell a story. I have 3 really helpful resources that I use all the time and I think are super awesome on this slide. The first one is colormeanings.com. So you can click on that and it's going to have like massive resources of the associations that people have with certain colors. The next one is called Coolers. Coolers is super, yeah, you recognize it. Yeah, it's awesome. It just gives you a color palette and you press space and it'll generate another color palette. So you can go on there and just spam space over and over again until you see a nice color palette you like for your character. So that can spark inspiration. And the very last one is color.adobe.com. So color.adobe.com is a palette builder made by Adobe, and it lets you easily create color palettes based on like different commonly used color palettes, and it's super helpful for character design. Okay, so we're moving on to talking about palettes. There are 6 types of common color palettes you'll see in art and by extension in character design. And following these palettes or rules while moving along a color wheel will help you generate a harmonious palette. So the 6 palettes we're going to talk about are complementary colors, analogous, monochromatic, split or split complementary, triadic, and square. Almost all art is going to fall into one of these. If you see a painting, it's probably one of these because these are the types of colors that look good to the eye when they're together. So, first one, we're talking about complementary and split complementary because they kind of go together. Complementary colors are the ones that are on opposite sides of a wheel. So complementary colors will be orange and blue, or red and green, or yellow and purple. They are opposites of each other, and they look really striking and strong next to each other. Split complementary is the same kind of idea, but instead you split the 2 colors adjacent to one of the colors on the sides of complementary. So for example, you could take that orange and that blue, but you're going to split the blue at the bottom into a richer blue and a green, and that's going to give you split complementary. I put Aang on here because he's definitely split complementary with the blue, yellow, and like orangey red. And yeah, there's some examples in the background of how you might see these palettes in art. Moving on, we now have analogous and monochromatic colors. So analogous colors are just those ones that are right next to each other on a color wheel. And monochromatic is the ones that are different ranges of one color on a color wheel. So when you see analogous colors, you might have yellows and greens next to each other, reds and oranges, that type of thing. And then monochromatic is just going to be just all of those ranges of a color. Triadic and square. So these are the more complicated ones. But in general, if you had a wheel in front of you, it's going to be the colors that are in a triangle or the colors that are in a square. So I thought that the Google logo was a very good example. I found this one online and I was like, that makes so much sense. So square colors, you have like quite a range across that whole color wheel, but you're keeping yourself limited to those four corners of it so that you don't start to make it feel like muddy or confusing. It feels stable because you've got colors that are from complete opposite ends. And then triadic is going to feel like it has a lot of energy to it because you're picking separate colors from a triangular portion of the wheel. But it's not going to be as close together as split complementary, where you're like, oh, two of those colors are close to each other. They're very different. All right, so now we're going to talk about color associations. So using specific colors can give you a character's emotion, personality, or qualities, and you can take advantage of this. So I put Avatar up here because I think that they use color in really cool and interesting ways. These characters represent things that their element and the color associated with it represent. So if you think about it like Katara, if you haven't seen the show, she's like very caring, and I'd say she's one of like the calmer, but she has like a quiet strength to, then that's blue. Like you totally would associate that with blue, with that calmness and the caring and that kind of thing. And then Aang is really active and energetic, and then they gave him this like bright orange and almost red, and that also you think of active and energetic. So that kind of thing. You can tell people things about your character just by the color that you put on them. So I put up a chart here from a website called Aweber, which is a marketing blog about creating better advertising. So the thing about color associations is that they're very relevant to character design, but they're also used all over in design, in marketing, in advertisements that you see every day. A company that might want you to believe that they're like healthy and natural will use a lot of green in their advertisements, or a company that wants you to think that they're stable or reliable might use a dark blue. And this is taught in schools. This is taught in marketing, and that's why I put this blog up here so that you could see that like this is something that is universal and used a lot. So here are some common color associations that people might have with certain colors, and they don't have to all apply to you in particular, but it's a generally universal thing. Okay, then we're going to talk about the 70-30 guide. So there's a 70-30 rule that can be applied to using two colors in a character design, and a 60-30-10 rule that can be used for three. It definitely doesn't apply to all characters, of course, but it can be helpful when making a character design because it gives you a good balance of three colors. So you can see these characters on the bottom left that I found are using the 60-30-10 rule, and they feel very balanced with the use of those colors. And also, you can see that they're using the same three colors, but the association that you might have with what those characters are like is changed by which color takes up the most space. The character in the middle looks much more threatening because the black and the red takes up more of their design. If it was white that was covering most of their design, they might look more approachable. And then I put some characters up here that I found online that I thought followed this rule. Okay, now we're moving on from color and we're going to talk about silhouette. So the silhouette test is something that you will see online whenever you look up character design. It's especially important in game design because in game design you want to be recognizable. You want people to instantly know who your character is as soon as they look at the box art. So the silhouette test is a check to see if your character is instantly recognizable at a glance. So here are a lot of popular characters, but in silhouette, and you can see that they're still recognizable. You know who they are. So, does anyone know the game Who's That Pokemon? Yeah, yeah. This is how you know that Pokemon designs are really, really good because this was something that they could do and you would know who it was based on silhouette. But we're going to do it with some random characters. So let's go. Who's this?
Mario.
No.
Dang it.
Yeah, okay, there we go. Yep.
Kirby.
Nope. This is your chance. That's Mario. Yeah, there you go. SpongeBob. Yeah. Cloud, yeah, okay. So, those are all character designs that you are instantly able to tell who they are based on that silhouette. So, that's really important that you're able to instantly tell who that character is because being able to tell who a character is lets you know who it is like on just a glance, and that's important in games. So I put up some silhouettes here. These aren't known characters. This was her name's Jessica Lyon, and she's a game artist. So this is an exploration she did into silhouette, and you can see that even though you don't know who these characters are, looking at their silhouette, you might be able to draw conclusions about what they're like as a character just based on what they're shaped like. And even though it's just silhouette, you get an idea of what they might look like if they were out of shadow, because that's a clear silhouette and you can see what's going on with their outfit and stuff. So this is something that might seem like, oh, of course that's going to work. But as someone who's attempted character design many, many times, I find this to be one of the hardest things because you try to make a recognizable silhouette, but it quickly gets muddled as pieces overlap. So you have to start thinking about how you can make different parts of a character design distinct from each other. So you can really tell like who it is quickly, especially when you're doing a lineup of characters. Okay, so telling a story. Now that we've gone over a lot of the basics of character design, let's talk about in the end how all these elements should come together. They should tell the character. They should tell the audience as soon as they see your character immediately who that person is. Considering other elements than the ones we've talked about, like your character's personality, occupation, or world, can sell it even more. Exaggerate important features. If your character is a fisherman and that is the only important thing about them, they better have a massive fishing rod or a fishing net that they carry around everywhere so that everyone knows that. Okay, and then a quick aside about telling a story is the pose. Character design can be more than just appearance, so you should consider the behavior and personality of your character, which both influence the character's pose. So if your character is very like tired all of the time and they're just not interested in life, they might slouch, they might like slump as they walk. Their pose would probably be their hands in their pockets looking uninterested. If your character is really strong and noble and brave, they're probably going to have like their chest up and their shoulders back and then stand like that all of the time. And if you're thinking about game characters, you might be in a situation where your player will only see a few sprites of your character, or they might see a single picture at the bottom with a dialogue box. So you want to make sure that that pose that they're in is going to tell a story about them. So moving on to a summary of everything we just talked about. We talked about the shape of characters. We talked about the color palette that you use on them. We talked about their silhouette and what it can communicate. We talked about the 70-30 rule or the 60-30-10 rule, and we talked about their story. So knowing all of that, let's move on to some case studies. I went onto r/top character designs, where people talk about their very favorite character designs, and I pulled some characters from there to talk about. So let's start with Hello Kitty. Shape. She's round. She's circles. You can see quickly that she's a friendly character, she's approachable, and they're selling that. Her palette, she's using, obviously, it's like opposite colors. You know, red and blue are pretty different on different sides of the color wheel. And I would say that that looks like a 60-30-10 very nearly. She's mostly white, she's got some blue, and then she's got a little red accent with the bow. Her silhouette, super easily recognizable. She's got the bow, but then it's like ears. Her whiskers, I think, are quite important. And those elements, even though they're small, you can instantly tell who she is. And then her story. She's so cute, and she likes dressing up because she's got a bow. Yeah, she's sweet, and you can tell that quickly. So Batman, very different character, but I think he follows a lot of the same rules. Shape, he looks strong, he looks imposing, he has wide shoulders, he's quite triangular in appearance. His palette, again, we have that 60-30-10 rule, I would say, because you've got 60% blue, maybe 30 that darkish gray, and then the 10 for the yellow accent. And you can see that like a lot of times that final color is like an accent color, but it's going to sell the character because red is, I would think, one of the most important colors to Hello Kitty, and yellow for Batman for the logo. Silhouette, super recognizable, especially when he does his like jump up in the air and fly like a bat thing. That's extremely silhouette. We talked about 60-30-10 rule and his story. He's a Batman, and he looks like it. He's got his little ears. He's got his. Someone said case study. I'm a professional. Yes, I am. Yeah. Moving on. Link. Again, shape. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting about him is that he's a mix of different shapes because you've got, when he stands still, his body's very boxy, you know, which is like, oh, he's reliable and he's the hero. But he's got his hat, which is a triangle, because he's clever and cunning and he's outwitting Ganon and he's fighting and that type of thing, and he's active. So I think that that's a cool way to show that you can mix shapes to tell people multiple things about your character. He's got a great silhouette with the hat, especially, but also I think his sword and shield contribute to his silhouette. And then talking about how his props are part of his silhouette, you can actually think about how Cloud, which I showed a silhouette of earlier, he has his hair, which is pretty recognizable, but that big sword is a choice because then you can instantly tell who it is. The massive sword was a decision to make him more recognizable. And then, yep, we've got green as a dominating color, and his story, he looks like a hero. He's got his belt, he's got his sword, and he's got his shield. Oh yeah, okay, so we got a comment in the chat is that it's interesting that the Batman design from the animated series is a lot more square. Well, okay, I haven't seen enough Batman to be able to really comment on that, but that is interesting because it might suggest that the character designers were trying to tell you different things about his character. Maybe in the animated series, he's supposed to look more like a reliable hero, and then maybe in the comic design or the game design, he's supposed to look more like a rebel vigilante. Case study Joker from Persona. So for shape, he's super sharp. We've got sharp tailcoat, sharp collar, sharp dagger, because he's a thief and he's supposed to look like a thief, and he's a criminal. Palette, you've got dominating black and gray, and I think even less than 10% maybe with the red just on his hands because he's stealing things. That's again telling a story there. Silhouette, he's got the strong collar and the strong coat, and even though you wouldn't really see it in silhouette, I think the mask is a very recognizable thing. And then, yeah, with a story, you can tell he's a thief. This person said, I never noticed how crazy his kicks are. Yep, he's got pointy shoes. He's telling you that he's a thief and he's cunning because he's pointy triangular shoes. Or both. So, Sonic. I think that he's interesting because he has a lot of sharp shapes, but I think that the round edges of them make him look more friendly. So he's got his really sharp hair, and it almost looks like speed lines, which is telling you he's fast. He's got his shoes, which are telling you that yes, he runs. He runs a lot, and that's his only prop that he's got, other than his gloves. But that's kind of like a generic thing. The shoes are telling you, oh, he runs really fast, and that's his whole thing. And then, yeah, that silhouette is super recognizable. You instantly know that it's Sonic, even though other characters might have big shoes and gloves. The hair spikes thing is very different. And then, again, the palette is really strong. That's like primary colors. We've got red, yellow, and blue. Okay, we've talked about everything related to character design. So you guys, you're experts. You're ready. So get out something to draw with. I know you have access to something. Get out something to draw with. Pencil, paper. If you only have your phone, get out your Notes app and pull out your finger and the pencil on Notes app because you're going to make a character design. That's right, chat. Yeah. Yeah, you have to do it too. Okay. So, you're going to design your own character based on all the rules that we just discussed. You need to think about shape, silhouette, palette, the 70-30 or 60-30-10 rule, and the character's story. That's a lot to think about. So I want you to think about one big goal, which is decide on something you want your design to convey. A personality, a bit of backstory, an occupation, and you're going to try to put that into your character design using one of the rules that we talked about. At the end, you should show your character design to someone next to you, text it to someone you know, and have them guess what the character's like. And your goal is to have them guess that thing that you tried to put in your character design. So, I have this slide for inspiration for you. I found silhouettes that were drawn by someone online, and I have them credited here. And you can use these silhouettes as a reference if you want to have a jumping off point, or I recommend making your own if you can. I also put up the palettes here if you need reference for what all those options are. And then I have the shape, silhouette, palette, 70-30, 60-30-10, and story up in case you need to remember what all the elements are. So, I'm going to set a 10-minute timer. And I would love all of you to make a character design. I know you have Notes out. Get it out. Okay. And your time starts now. Go. Begin. And everyone who's in the chat, if you want me to go back to any particular slides that you want to look at or reference, just tell me and I can move it back for you. Thank you. Yeah.
He's manifesting a character.
Yeah. It's really hard when you like really get into starting trying to do it. Okay, we're 3 minutes in. Hopefully you've got like a general concept that you want to try to convey in this character design. I cannot wait for show and tell in the room. We're going around in a circle, guys. It's gonna be great. And if anyone in person needs me to go back to a slide or wants to see a slide, just let me know. I'm happy to go back. We are at our halfway point, which is why I did not make the timer 5 minutes, because I've done speed challenges before and 5 minutes is rough. So 5 more minutes, you have that same amount of time to just finish up whatever you're doing. neutral colors counted in the 60-30-10? I would say not if it's like a skin tone. I think usually I wouldn't see a skin tone as part of the 60-30-10. Let me go back to my example slide on that. Okay. So yeah, in the characters that I pulled up as examples, I would say only with Ganon was it really something I was considering part of his color palette, because he's got that like blackish gray, he's got the red, and he's got his green skin tone. But I think with the usual human skin tone, generally no. And then if you were going to have like almost like a beige base, it just depends on how important it is to the design. Probably not, in my opinion. I'm so sorry. Spoilers, spoilers, yeah. Inspiration. Okay. We are at 1 minute 30 seconds, everybody. So put those last touches on your character design.
Color them.
Color them, yeah. Make sure to get that palette in there. Ten seconds, y'all. Final touches, and then it's pencils down. Okay, time's up. Pencils up. Hands in the air. You did what you did.
Is this Hell's Kitchen?
Yeah, it's Hell's Kitchen. Okay, who wants to go first?
Who wants to volunteer?
Mm-hmm. Everyone goes. Okay, yeah. What's your name?
My name's Kenny.
Okay, Kenny, what'd you do?
I made this little fellow
Oh
right
my
here.
gosh, look at him.
I started by generating his color palette with one of the websites
With
he
coolers.
provided.
Yeah, coolers are super cool.
I got it. I felt kind of a very cold kind of design, so I decided to go for mostly jacket. And for the jacket, I want to go with a lot of triangles and circles
Yeah.
to kind of convey an idea of they're friendly, but maybe not towards you. If you're someone else, they be friendly, but since you're you, they're against you.
Yeah. I mean, I almost get the vibe that like this would be a character in a game that I can buy something suspicious from in an alley or something. You know, like they're gonna help me, but they're not the best person kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I see like the sharp shapes, but also there's a general roundness to the face. Great character design. That's awesome.
Don't point the hat up, or else you're gonna make him look like a clan member.
Well, he's a gray brown.
It'll
He's
probably
just a
be like
spooky little
flicking
guy.
in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just a silly little guy.
You know.
There couldn't be any silly little guys in the clan.
Who wants to go next?
I guess.
Let's see it.
I mean, my general idea was just kind of like,
Yeah.
like the bug catcher from Pokemon.
Yes.
That's what I was kind of going for.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of circles, but like in the hair
Mm-hmm.
and like some of the clothes shape, I wanted to add more like sharper edges.
More sharpness, yeah, because like she's adorable, but she's gonna fight you with her bug net. Yeah.
It's giving more like snobby kid.
Yes. Yeah. No, I totally see it. I also love the pose, like the storytelling of that. She looks very energetic.
Are you open for critique?
Oh yeah.
Don't
Don't look at the colors.
Don't worry about it. I think personally, she has a big net, but I can't exactly tell what the net is used for. Is it either for fish or is it for bugs? And I know it's like huge and it's over exaggerated, but ultimately, I would like to see maybe like bugs in her hair to like maybe show that she likes catching bugs, or maybe like bandages or like rough patches on her skin to show that she's been through bushes and not swimming in a lake.
It would be cute if you made the bow like a butterfly.
Yeah, actually. Yeah,
Pretty adorable.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go next. Almost done. Milan, do you wanna go?
Okay, my one is buns.
Well,
but-
what also
okay.
you did it on your phone with your finger instead of a drawing tablet. That's really hard.
Okay, so
So-
I made this. Okay, it's gonna be hard to show these, but you know what? Whatever. So I made this like tornado.
Oh, tornado
guy.
dude. Okay,
I
awesome.
made this like tornado dude. The palette. I didn't think about the palette, but I just chose like storm colors, like
Yeah.
light gray.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I like it. I feel like he looks like he could be like the mascot for a sports team type thing. Like I like the eyes and stuff. It looks cool.
Yeah, and I kind of went for like a a triangle shape is a tornado is
Yeah.
triangle, and also circles because hurricanes are like circly with a lot
Yeah.
of like
He's villainous. I like those sharp eyes.
yes.
Okay. Let's see it.
I made a worm.
Oh my gosh. You made a little
The
worm.
worm.
He's so cute. Yeah, he's got round eyes, so he looks really friendly. I'm sorry, everyone on Twitch. We're almost done with show and tell.
We got 2 more people.
Yeah. He's looking great.
I see a lot of triangles in it, so I'm guessing this worm is very dangerous.
Yes, venomous even. You know,
He's threatening.
neon colors equals poison. Am I right?
There we go.
Yeah.
I was trying to do parallel colors for like fear and stuff.
Ooh, yeah.
Man,
Okay.
it puts fear in people.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. We literally guessed it correctly. That's good.
Yeah, he's
I mean, the
good.
worm itself is supposed to be scared, but yes.
Well, he's you gotta be scared to be scary, right? Right? Is that what I'm saying?
Hurt
I'm
people
not
with
sure if
people,
that's-
There we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Character subversion.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Last one.
Oh, for me. So I made like a guy, and he was like, what was it?
Damn.
I didn't give him a face. Oh yeah, there's no face because I didn't have time to figure out how to draw a face.
If you don't hold it still, we can't see
Oh
it.
shoot.
Nice.
Love it, man.
Look at him.
So like I wanted to make him like kind of lanky to be like unnatural, unnatural a little bit too much of lankiness. I made his head sort of triangle shape to like give a sense of danger, but like not too much. And like I put a bit more pointiness in the hair. I'd supposedly hair. It ended up looking more like a pirate hat because I did it with my finger, but
Yeah.
yeah.
You're
And
right.
then,
Yeah, I think it's cool. I like how you went for like monochromatic dark. He looks very spooky.
Carrots.
yeah, that is a carrot. Hang on. He could be a carrot guy.
You know,
Scary carrot guy. That could be.
scary carrot guy.
That actually is interesting. Okay.
All right.
And then I realized like 5 minutes in, like I should do this too. So here's my
Queen
She made
Pig.
Technoblade.
Yeah, look at her. So she is a very caring and kind ruler, but she's a little bit all over the place. But she's very warm and caring, so I tried to go with like analogous warm colors. Yeah, she's a very friendly lady.
Peppa Pig in it, yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
Alright.
And that's the end of character design. I hope you guys had fun and you learned some things. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you to Summer, who was in charge of our character design. I am Lucy. I am the main director of these workshops, and I am now going to be talking about pixel art. Now, I apologize to everybody in here. I usually don't do this, but I do have a script that I'm going to like solely rely on, not because I want to. I unfortunately have been awake since 12 a.m. I don't think I can operate right now if I don't look at something, and therefore I will be staring at my phone a lot. I apologize. All right. Okay. So, now, before we start learning pixel art, I want to bring this image up. So, can you guys recognize this character? You guys can tell.
Mario.
Oh!
Wait, it's not Peach. What was her name? Princess Toadstool? Yeah.
Okay, we got Princess Toadstool. We have Mario.
Princess Peach.
It's Peach. Well,
It was Toadstool, so you know.
okay, well, yeah. So it is Princess Peach. And I mean, I found the first time I saw this pixel art, I did not know who the hell she was. Because personally, I found her weird looking. I mean, I could tell she was a princess, but you know, she's not. I don't really like her design. You know. And I mean, this is official art from the 1985 Super Mario Brother game. Um, so imagine you're a wee little boy from 1985 playing this game. This is the debut game of Super Mario, so there's like no other official interpretation of Peach. Now, how would you like interpret Peach if they were like in real life? I don't think you would be looking at Peach in this like feminine beauty look. More like this. Oh wait, where the hell is it? Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. Um, I bring this up because in pixel art, you don't have that much pixel room to work with. One key concept of pixel art is readability, and how you choose to scale down your characters determines how viewers interpret your design. That's why having good character design is essential in making readable pixel art. Too many details in your characters will get lost when you scale down, and if it's essential that all clothing detail must be there to tell you that who and what this player is, you probably need to reevaluate your design. Now you could say, let's just increase the amount of pixels Peach has so we have more room to work with. We can then easily make her character more readable. But you know, Mario was 16 by 16 pixels, while Peach is 16 by 24. Imagine trying to scale Peach even further down to Mario's height. This is the nuance to pixel art. You wouldn't change the pixel art design of Mario because he's clearly readable as a guy with a big nose, mustache, and overalls, but try to pull that success onto a pixel art design for Peach, where she doesn't have a double chin. I'm ultimately not saying that Peach is a flawed character design. I'm saying pixel art is not the art of just scaling down real life objects. It's about redesigning real life objects to make them more clear to the viewer when details are restricted by pixel density. Alright, so now let's actually get into pixel art. Pixel art is an art style where individual pixels are used as the building blocks to make works of art. Creating pixel art means every pixel is deliberate in its choice of color and placement, giving the artist full control over the outcome of the end result. Early computers and consoles had very low resolution displays that could only show a very small amount of pixels at a time. Space Invaders and the original Mario ran at 256 by 224 pixels. These machines could only render a few colors as well. The NES could only render 56 different colors, but can only display 25 at a time. Pixel art was born from the graphical limitations of the old video games. As time goes on, consoles improved, and now we can run a shit ton of pixels. And as such, pixel art is now a chosen style rather than a constraint. So what are the art softwares that can make pixel art? So funny thing, Most, if not all, drawing softwares can make pixel art. When creating a canvas in a drawing software, you can decide how big the canvas is. If you make your canvas super small, you're giving yourself less pixels to work with. Now, if you find these blended lines in between pixels, that's anti-aliasing, and drawing software should have a setting to turn that off. However, as pixel art is such a unique way to draw, there are now many softwares that specialize in creating pixel art. Sprite is the most popular and probably the best pixel art software out there. Now it is $20, but there is a free trial. It's not a corporation and does not hold a monopoly over all pixel art softwares, unlike Adobe. But ultimately it is one, if not the best, and that's why everybody calls it industry standard. But you can also compile it from GitHub. Now, if you want some free sprites or free softwares, there's LibreSprite, which is a forked version of Sprite before it became a commercial product. It doesn't have all the up-to-date features, but it has all the bare-bone needs of doing pixel art, so try it out. You have GraphicsScale, which is an old-school product and a bit dated, but it's been around for many years and is still pretty reliable. Pixelorama is free on itch, but it's also on Steam. However, if you want to get it on Steam, it is $10. That is just a caveat to it. Lastly, Pixel is a free web browser for pixel art. So, for pixel art, your subjects need to be clear as possible while using the least amount of pixels while drawing with pixels. That's why outlines and line art is such a big part of this art style, as it's like the easiest tool to show shapes and edges. And as such, we're going to go over them. We want the pixeled lines to be perceived as we intended, so edge flow needs to be clear and concise. Common lines include the perfect line, which is the 1 to 1, the 2 to 1, which you put 2 down and then 1 up, and then 2 down and then 1 up, scaling upward, and then the 3 by 1. To emulate a straight line, all pixels must fit in a patterned manner. Circular lines can be made by gradually decreasing the amount of pixels that make up a line into like the corner piece of the curve. To make any line or curvature clean, you must keep a consistent pixel pattern progression. You can make an angle between 45 and its half by patterning 1 up and then 2 across. We call pattern lines that aren't the simple coefficients intermediates. To make line arts clean, you need to recognize doubles. Doubles are where 2 pixels meet and form a right angle. Like the 2 pixels that are like on top into like either the left or right of them, they will usually create a third pixel in between them, which will create a right angle. We usually don't like those if you want clean 1 pixel outlines. Doubles can make line work look thicker and make certain areas appear sharper or darker. If there is no intent in having a double in a certain area, you should remove them. Delete the sharp corner and you get a clean, consistent outline. But you can also use doubles as a bolder outline. Jaggies are pixels that break a line. They can make your clean lines and curves look broken, so either realign the stray pixels or redraw the lines in a consistent pixel pattern. Looking here, all the red pixels are jaggy. To check if you have jaggies, count each pixel in each row until you hit the peak of your curve. So basically you see here, this curve has a bunch of jaggies. It's highlighted in red that these are ones, and if you want to get a consistent pattern, you need these to be basically mirrored in a 1, 1, 2, 2, 4, and mirror on the other side as well. Obviously, this is really weird because you're going down on 1 count of the pixel. So you have 1 pixel here, and then you're marching up to 2, 2, and then 1. Which ultimately you want to be scaling gradually upwards until you hit the apex number, which is 5. So you probably want to have like 3 or something, but in this case, the artist chose to do a 1, 1 to 2, 2 pattern. Make sure the other side, like I said, is mirroring it as well. Okay. All right, now let's talk about anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing is a technique to smooth out the transitions up to different values by creating in-between values of the line. This is where we think about crunchy media. The compression and rescaling of videos results in these in-between pixels where like information is lost. Videos will then use anti-aliasing to smooth out the jaggedness of the pixels using filters, averaging, or smoothing out the pixels. When anti-aliasing a line, choose a color or gradient of colors in between your two shades. And when you feel like it's too sharp, continue the outline by adding the in-between colors. Best practice is to refer to the line it is hugging and stop one pixel before it makes you continue. Oh shit. Best practice is to refer to the line it hugs and stop one pixel before it makes you continue a line hug, and then the entirety of the next line. So I should. Yeah. So this is basically how you do anti-aliasing. Um, we this middle one is a little too sharp for us, so we're gonna first choose the lightest gradient color and put one pixel forward of the line it's going to follow. If you want to make a little bit more anti-aliasing, you'll probably choose the second color and have the line it follows. So you see on the far right side, we are going to follow the lower line by continuing the top line and adding one more pixel. And if you want to make it smoother transition, you're just going to have to keep on adding pixels forward to continue this line you have right here by hugging the second line you have down there. Ultimately, you do not want to be exceeding or to the point where you are putting a pixel right on top of the last line you are hugging, because that ultimately leads to banding. Banding, where all the lines are just basically hugging the outline. It leads to pillow shading, which makes everything look flat in general. Ultimately, anti-aliasing is not for shading objects. It's to smooth out outlines or harsh color transitions. You do not need anti-aliasing when you're working with flat angles, which is just the straight lines, or 45-degree angles, which is going to be the 1-to-1 pattern that just goes straight upward. Now let's look at different types of outlines. There's the standard black outline, which will shape the outside of the silhouette, while an inline will shape also the components of the character. Colored lines take a lighter shade of the component in the outline and then outline it accordingly with a selective outline. Okay, next show. Colored outlines take a lighter shade of the component and outline it accordingly, while a selective outline also can be referred to as a sellout or a broken outline, selectively outlines between colored and black outlines. Sellout is basically putting the anti-aliasing onto the outline. Colored lines usually face the light source while the dark outlines face away. Okay. Last thing to go over is space. A pixel is usually never found left alone. A group of pixels that form a silhouette of a shape are called a pixel cluster. The location of where you place a pixel can majorly affect how your viewer sees the work. This color of pixel differs in color and value from the background, and such they are a cluster. We are referring to the black and red pixels in this top example right here. The black and red ones together are a cluster, and this lighter color in the background is a background. Now, based on where you put this red pixel, it will change how you view the shape overall. If you put the pixel in between these two corner pieces, now it looks like a long island with two little small islands onto the side. If you put it in between these three, now these three islands look like they're connected together with one single dot. This one, same thing. Now, three different islands with one single dot, and same thing right here. Ultimately, just by those two pixels, you completely morph the silhouette and the image that you are trying to display to the person that is reading your art. These two pixels are floating in the middle of nowhere. These two are clustered together. And obviously they look out of place, but if you put this as next to a lighter source and then basically say this is anti-aliasing, now this becomes a cluster, and these two now don't make no sense. All right. Now let's talk about color. Back in the NES days, the system could only hold 56 different colors and display only 15 at a time. To hold the traditional vibes of pixel art, having this specific limited color palette up there, that limited color palette is what the NES had, and if you want If you want to keep the old vibes, keep that palette. But ultimately, the limited color palette has stayed throughout the generations, and this is why like we prefer limited color palettes. Having limited color palettes makes your art feel cohesive and readable. Too many colors can make a sprite look noisy and lost, especially at small resolutions. Now, color is built off these concepts called hue, saturation, and lightness. Hue is the actual color that you are looking at. An apple is red. Saturation is how close the apple is to red. Is the apple nuclear red, or is it like a dulled out gray? And lightness is how bright or dark an apple is. Is the apple lighter and closer to white, or darker and closer to black? Color palettes can determine moods of an environment. Hue can control emotional temperature, saturation creates liveliness, and lighting controls clarity and atmosphere. Your choice in color determines what the players can read clearly, so make sure that the player differs from the background, either from having their saturation levels, hues, or values different from the background. Ultimately, your choice to work around, and there are plenty of color palettes made by other individuals online for you guys to pull from. Another critical component is color ramps. A color ramp is a series of shades of a color that you use to basically shade an object. It's basically a color palette for a singular object. The gradient between the lightest and the darkest does not only have to change through adding either black or white, but saturation and hue as well. If you can see up there, mainly this is a pretty good example, the blue one here. The gradation from blue light to blue dark touches on yellow, which is a hue differentiation. But this is still clearly a light to dark scale of an object. Ultimately, as long as the luma or the perceived brightness, if you take colors and then put them in a black and white scale, as long as the lightest color is red as the lightest of the whole bunch, that can be a valid color ramp. Okay. Now, the trick to keeping color counts low, but also cohesive with the other colors you are. Now this is a trick to keep color counts low, but also cohesive with the other colors you're working with. So you see this blue? I want to make a color ramp out of it. So I will map out the scale of colors from light to dark that I want and map it out. This scales by saturation, lightness, and hue. As you can see, the value changes by the dark areas adding a little bit more purple and a little more black, which is differentiating the hue and the value / lightness. And then going upwards, it increases the hue with the saturation and like the value in general. Okay. Now I want to make a red color ramp, and I noticed that the dark areas in my blue have a little bit hints of like red through its purple. So instead of introducing a new dark color, I choose to use the color ramp of my blue ramp and make the darkest color for my red ramp. Now, I want a yellow, and I like the hints of orange in my red ramp in the middle, so I'll take that midtone and make that the darkest color in my yellow color ramp. I can do the same thing with green. When I see that there is a little bit of hint of green in my blue color ramp, and this is how you make a cohesive color palette while keeping your color count low. We were able to decrease our colors. We were able to decrease 3 colors, or avoid adding 3 more colors by just borrowing colors from other ramps. And ultimately, it makes our color palettes feel like they rely on each other. This is not only good for just in general good pixel art illustrations, but all of your games will use them. So, all right, now let's get into shading. An object without light or shadow is an empty silhouette, as this is the technique that makes an object look like it exists in 3D space. Though we are working in a 2D environment, shading is needed to show depth and make sure our game doesn't appear flat. Before we shade tiles or weapons or characters, we need to learn to shade the basic shapes, because almost everything is built off of these combinations. And since pixel art we are working with has very few colors it does get tricky. Shading will always have a highlight, a midtone, and a shadow. Highlights receive the most direct light, while the midtones and the shadows receive less and less. It is important that shadows follow the form of an object. Round objects should have the light round around them, and basically, like this, round objects, whenever they get tilted downwards, you need to make sure that the light follows the shape of the tilted circle, not as in like just straight lines when you're looking at it at an angle. Outlines by your choice can also interact with the lighting, just like the sellout technique where we use the lighter shades of the bright side of the colors to outline the highlights, and then we use black or the darker version of the shadow colors and outline the shadows. Now the biggest don't is pillow shading, the habit of putting the light in the center and darkening around darkening towards the edges. It comes from banding, which is outlining your borders with a darker color. Ignoring the direction of a light source can make everything look inconsistent and confusing. You can only tell this is a school from the outline, and it makes for bad clarity. Keep your lighting consistent with all of your sprites. Pixel art has a huge emphasis on consistency. Mistakes in your lighting are easily noticeable as the art itself isn't that complex. Now, dithering is a technique for artists who want to make an in-between shade for two colors without introducing a new color. For old monitors, this technique was super good because they would actually just blur the dithered area and obscure the pattern. But now dithering is a stylization technique. A common way to dither is by using a checkerboard pattern, which is seen right here. These are the checkerboard patterns. There's also interlaced dithering, where two sides of a dither will come together and merge. We basically have darker or yeah a gray, a dark baby black, and then we have a lighter gray in the middle. We take the shade of the darker grays, or like that. This is the actual black. We take the black and then we interlace it with the darker gray, and then we interlace white in between, and then we will interlace that to the dark, and ultimately this color here would, if you squint, it's really not that, it's not easy to see for this color, but it's hypothetically supposed to form this shade right here because you're mixing the dark and the light to make the middle tone right here. There's also ways to make there's also ways to make levels to dithering. When you take this example here, each level of dithering will decrease the pixel count by a certain amount and a certain consistent amount. That's what makes the scaling down look so good. You can also do stylized dithering, which is basically this one, but do not mistake it for randomized dithering, which is that one. Stylized dithering can have layers. You are ultimately designing the dithering, and you are making sure that each level of the dither is decreasing in pixel count, but ultimately keeping a consistent pattern. Randomized, you're just making a computer doing it. It's just randomized. Yeah. Dithering is awesome, but do not overuse this tool. For smaller sprites, using dithering can make it messy and hard to read, and it just also makes it like unwanted texture. If your sprite just is like 50% dithering, just add a new color. And also make sure the colors between your dither and your base color are like closer and like not of strong contrast. This is a bad projection, but this is ultimately a red dither on the bottom, and projecting it onto green makes this really it doesn't look good. There's this in-between color, you cannot deduce what it is because the contrast is too stark. All you can see is the pixel checker pattern. But this is a dark red on a normal red. It's good. It looks better. Okay. Now let's talk about how to actually start building a game into pixel art. These are the things that you should pay attention to. Resolution. So what's resolution? Simply put, it's the number of pixels that make up a display. Higher resolutions have more pixels and therefore can render an image in more detail. The size of your monitor does not determine the resolution. For example, iPhones and full HD TV screens can display almost the exact same amount of pixels. When you make a game in a small resolution, the machine that plays the game will try to scale the visual size up, so we ultimately want our pixels to look good in every resolution. When you scale up pixels, we must always increase by an integer. This is a simple 2x2 block. In a trigger pattern, if we want to increase this pixel pattern, we have to multiply by an integer, and if we multiply it by 2, we're going to get a 4x4 block with a 2x2 for each color. Now, if you take the base and then multiply it by 3, now each base color is going to have a 3x3, and ultimately this is good scaling. If you scale by a non-integer like 1.5, it's either going to try to round the pixel forward or backward, which is going to create this uneven look. Or even if you choose to do this scaling bilinearly, which is where the machine will take a pixel and then look at the 4 pixels that are surrounding it, and the average of those 4 pixels will then come to the middle pixel and be like, yeah, okay, this is like black, this is white, this is black, this is white. Okay, I'm gonna make this in gray. We never made gray in our pixel pattern, and yet we come out with these gray middle patches. For this example, basically scaling down, you're gonna lose a lot of information, and also it's at a 0.5, so you literally do not see any overlap of anything. This 0.25 and this this 0.5, it's going to basically have uneven pixeling. This is like a 1 pixel long, and then this is 2 pixels. These are like the doubles that we don't like. Ultimately, if you slice it up all the way by a full integer, you're going to keep the same information retained. Okay. Now let's connect this to actual in-game resolutions. Most monitors and TVs are 16 by 9 with a standard resolution of 1280 by 720, 1920 by 1080, 2560 by 1440, and 3480 by 2160, which is basically this is we have 720p, 1920p, 144, and 3480. I'm pretty sure 720p is HD, 1920 is full HD, 256 or 144p is 4K resolution, and 3480 is 8K resolution. Now, if we want to replicate that into that retro feel, we're going to have to find a resolution closest to the 250s. As you know, the old pixel games like Mario were rendered at 256 by 224. The easiest way to find a resolution we're looking for is to start from 1920 by 1080, which is the most popular resolution, and divide it down. If you divide 1920 and the 1920 by 1080 pixel size by 8, you're going to get 2400 by 135, which is the closest we're going to get to 256 by 224. And through integer scaling upwards, our base times 2 is equal to 480 by 270. Our base times 4 is going to equal 960 by 540. Our base times 6 gets 1440 by 810. And our base times 8 gets back to 1920 by 1080. Once you hit 1920 by 1080, you're going to get to 4K and 8K resolution easily, which it seems simple, right? Okay, but you may have noticed that this skips over 1280 by 720. To get to 720 from 1240, or 240, to get to 720, which is from 240, you're going to find that it's going to be in between 960 and 144. If you multiply 240 by 135 by 5.333 and so on, you're going to get that 720p, and ultimately that's going to lead to this because we are not scaling by a full integer. If you look closely here, the projector barely can show it, but I suppose down here probably is better. The original, if you scale by 150%, which is the inside the 8s and the 0s, they're going to get squished down. They reduced it by 1 pixel. They reduced it to 1 pixel. And then this 100 here, they doubled it. They doubled the pixel count in here, and then or it looks like they doubled the pixel count inside the black inside the 0 because they reduced the size of the white pixels by 1. This is not good. We want to keep our scale consistent throughout the entirety of our scaling, which is why a better solution to start from a native resolution like 1320 by 180. If you multiply 320 by 180 by 2, you're going to get 640 by 360. Multiply the base by 4, and you get 1280 by 720, which is exactly what we're looking for. Multiplying the base by 6 is going to get you 1920 by 1080, and you can take that and you can apply it to the rest behind. This is going to 320 by 180 is going to be the standard for all pixel games these days. Celeste uses them, and so on and so forth. This scales naturally between all of the most popular resolutions. Okay, now we're going to talk about character sizes. Sprites like characters and in-game assets usually start at 16 by 16 pixels. From there, they usually scale up exponentially into 32 by 32, 64 to 64, and even 128 by 128. And why 16 by 16? Well, first, the smallest and most common tile size designers use are the 8 by 8s, like Celeste here. If you count, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pixels. This is an 8 by 8 pixel. And your character is usually a multiple of a tile tall, so it'll fit naturally into the environment. For example, Madeline is 2 pixels tall, and therefore she is a 16 by 16, while a pixel is an 8 by 8. Based on your game's needs, you do not need to force your character to stay in an 8 by 8, a 16 by 16, a 32 by 32. Based on your, like, if you're making a fighter game, you don't really care about pixel heights. Just depending on what you need, feel free to make a player character height as big as you want. But ultimately, the implied scale of a game is based on the relationship between the player, the background, and the knowledge that we know about real life. Okay, now on to sprite sheets. Sprite sheets are 2D bitmaps with a certain width or height that can be composited into larger level scenes. Compiling all animation states of an object into one sheet is what we call a sprite sheet. Using sprite sheets improves game performance, as the more files you upload into the program, the longer it takes to retrieve and transfer data. If you have 5 player animations or 5 states of a player animation, sending 1 file in, sending 5 different files in, the machine is going to have to pick out the first file and then paste it on. And then after that command is done, they're gonna take that one down and then put the second one up. That takes a lot of processing time. And so by just only putting in 1 piece of paper in, they'll just be like, okay, I just uploaded 1 piece of paper, and then I just shift the axis of the paper, and basically, or like technically, they would cut it up for you, but ultimately, having 1 piece of paper inside the machine will reduce the amount of memory your machine takes up, and then it will have more time to put some energy into managing player output instead of setting up a scene. Now, when making sprite sheets, reducing as much unused pixel space as when making sprite sheets, reduce as much unused space as possible by packing sprites as tightly as possible together. Dead space is just extra memory, and technically extra money, being wasted, all this like empty pixels. However, making sure each sprite is consistent in size, as programs that read sprite sheets cut them up into grids, and having uneven sprite sheets can cut up your sprites into very unwanted ways. Okay. Now for tile sets. What's a tile set? In simple terms, a tile set is a collection of reusable pixel art blocks that can be combined and make large environments like levels, backgrounds, and maps. Think of like a Lego set. Each tile is a brick you design, and the ways you put them together, you can build structures and maps without drawing a whole scene. In game engines such as Unity, there's a built-in tool that basically converts tiles into stamps, which then can be effectively painted onto your scene. Most pixel tiles are 8 by 8, 16 by 16, or 32 by 32, depending on the resolution and the level of detail you want. A tile defines the grid of your game. It's the basic unit the character moves on and is how your environment is built on. There are common tile sets for 2D platforms for top-down game view. There are common tile sets for 2D platformers to top-down game views. Every tile here is designed to look seamlessly when put next to each other in a neighboring tile. If you see here, this is a 9 by 9, which we have 4 corners and then 4 conjoining sides and 1 in the middle. If you do not know where to start with your pixel tile sets, just make the 9 by 9. Make sure the pixels can lead off to 2 edges. The edges can lead off of two corners or 2 edges on itself, and the whole is just a whole. Now, when designing tiles, seamless tiling is key. Tiles need to be connected to each other without obvious gaps or mismatched edges. If the left edge of the gap doesn't match the right one on the next, suddenly your floor looks very disconnected. So basically, for this example, if you make a tile set here and then you just like slap it on, you're going to have these large gaps because you didn't consider the seamless tiling, where you can, because like ultimately to make seamless tiling, you do have to draw a rock on the edge of the tile, so it will connect to the next tile up on top. And ultimately, if you fill out all of these gaps, you can make seamless tiling. Also, get some variation in your tile sets. Even if you have a repeating ground tile, adding small alternative tiles like cracks or stones, patches of dirt, or even flowers can make your environments feel alive. Small variations can add character and storytelling to an environment. Okay, and lastly, why use tile sets? Tile sets exist just to save work. Instead of drawing an entire 320 by 10 by 1800 level, which is like 50,000 individual pixels, you design a handful of tiles and let the computer do the placement. This also makes it easier to update your art later. You can easily replace pixel tiles if you want to visually update them, as the machine knows the location of every individual block. If you make an edit to one block, you can just drag, drop it in, replace, and then the machine will replace all of them for you. So you don't have to freaking redraw a whole background. This is ultimately a really huge time saver, and it's one of the core benefits of working with tile sets. And lastly, let's look at projection. There are a few choices when it comes to how you want your game to be projected. We have 2 categories. We have perspective, which is a realistic way of projecting 3D forms on a 2D environment using vanishing points and horizon lines. We have 1 point, 2 point, and 3 point perspective based on the amount of vanishing points a projection may have. And then we also have paraline projection, where all the edges of an object are parallel with each other. There are no vanishing points, there are no horizon lines, and as such, you will find more or less isometric in this category. You can find isometric in this category, but it's a misconception that isometric is paraline. Paraline, or isometric, is a type of paraline projection, and ultimately, there's so many different kinds of paraline projections that you probably are mislabeling and misidentifying isometric as every single type of paraline projection. Therefore, we're going to go through them. So, under paraline perspectives, you're going to have orthographic and you're going to have oblique. We're going to first go over orthographic. Orthographic is this kind of projection has all planes of an object at true scale and depth, and this kind of projection has all planes of an object at true scale and depth, and and that is conveyed through the axes. Through the orthographic perspective, there's multi-view, which is the direct view of the plane, which is going to be mainly your platformers. Or you're going to have axonometric, where you're going to see multiple sides of one object. Isometric is going to be part of the axonometric projection. With edges that lock at one angle are basically saying that this example right here, each of these angles is locked at the. Oh my God, both of them crunched up the lines. I can't even read my own. Let me pull up the angle. Yeah, for isometric angles, each side or each axis, the angle is projected at 120 degrees. For diametric, two edges will share one angle. This example right here, it says the top two are both 105 angles, and then the bottom is 150. Diametric is basically taking isometric and like shifting the camera a little bit downward or a little bit upwards. So a little bit more than a flat top-down view. Ultimately, and then lastly, trimetric, you have no edges that share an angle, which on there, they're just none of those angles that are shared are equal. Ultimately, orthographic is your camera is being locked at a 45-degree angle, and as the edges of your object are parallel with each other, no matter how far you scale your camera back, nothing is going to warp in the camera. Now, oblique presents one. All right, now we have oblique projection where one face is at a true scale while depth is conveyed through unrealistic warping. The camera is now like not at 40 degrees angles, but now on top of a plane or on the side of a plane. Like if you imagine a square around your environment, the camera is not the camera at 45 degrees is going to be your orthographic, and your oblique is going to be up here or on the side. Through orthographic, three types of oblique projections include cavalier, which is going to be, I cannot read still. Cavalier is going to be this one, where basically your camera is going to be front facing, and so that means the front plane, which is the one with the door, that one's going to be at a true scale. But then we take the back items and then we skew them left or right. We force them to show projection by forcing their angles to be projected unrealistically. Now, ultimately, this house, you guys know, is like it's technically a pentagon, like a pentagon prism, whatever. But realistically, a pentagon prism is not going to look like that in real life. We're forcing this front plane to be like front facing, while we have these side objects like forcefully pushed over. Okay. Top down is going to be basically top down. We're going to still have our camera facing forward, but instead of forcing we have our front plane still at true scale, but instead of forcing our back angles to face left or right, we're going to push them upward, basically skewing our back angles upward. And then lastly is military, where you're just like a military, you're going to place your camera on top, like a top-down projection, but which implies that, like this one is a better example. This is a perfect square, even though it is a perfect square. This is a perfect projection of a square, and you're basically forcing everything down here to just push like forward, because or like I think it's probably better this way. We're basically forcing these planes to be pushed like this way, like because this is like our ceiling. Yeah, okay. Military is where her camera is projecting on top, making the roof look like true scale, but then creating depth by pulling the planes downward. I hope that's better explanation than I have. Okay. Now, the most complex angle, or the more complex but also the most common pixel art projection that you're going to find is isometric. And so as such, we're going to spend some time talking about how to use isometric projections in your pixel art. If you want to project a pixel art as its true isometric view, it's actually not possible, or more or less unideal. If we draw pixel perfect lines on a 30-degree angle, which is this one, you can't exactly tell. This is very crunchy, the projector itself, but the lines here are very uneven patterned. Like we have, yeah, it's a very uneven pattern. The lines itself are gonna look really like uneven, and we just don't like that visually. So we ultimately cheat, and by putting it at a 26-degree angle, we can have a pattern of basically this one, and two, and then two, and then two, like a 2x1 angle downwards. Which I did initially say in the beginning that making a 45-degree angle, and then so I said that you can make a right angle by using like 0 and 90, and that's going to be straight lines. We can make a 45-degree by making a one-to-one pixel upward pattern. And I did say if you want to make a angle in between 45 and the 0, you would do a 2x1 and 2x1. This angle right here is actually not the perfect in between 45. What is 45 times 2? Or divided by 2? That number isn't actually the perfect projection of it. We usually force the projection to be like a little bit skewed to like have our cute little patterns. We like patterns here. This keeps the pixel art itself very consistent. Okay. And all right. There are 3 different isometric tile sets, all based on editing. How many? Okay. So there are 3 different ways that we can take a isometric cube and project it. If you choose to have 2 pixels in the middle of your tiles, which this is going to, I believe, be the perfect. What? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. That's 22. Okay, it's not the perfect. I'm not looking at the perfect. I think this is cool. But if we want this corner to be a perfect mirror of the pattern by having each receding line to be 2 pixels, then what did I write about this? We can either choose to stay faithful to the 2x1 pattern by keeping 2 on the corner, or we can have 3 pixels in the middle while keeping the 2x2, and then we can keep this middle line perfect, or what was it? Or perfectly overlapping each other in the back. Like, see, this one is these corners are going to be a little bit skewed off, but this one's going to be in the middle. Or you can have 4 pixels in the middle here and have it skewed again. The better for the isometric, if we want to stay faithful, sure, we can do that. But this is actually probably the most popular way of making 4 pixels, because if you want to make an isometric tile set, shading this will give us a very clear distinction of where the planes end. And also just ultimately gives us a lot more room to work with here. If you see here, these are basically the same projection, but this one has less room to work with, this one has a little bit more, and also if we look at the shading, if we shade the cube right here, you're only going to have 1 pixel here, which doesn't exactly align with our 2x2 pattern that we really like. This one leaves a 2 pixel gap, which gives us the pattern that we like, and 3 pixels. Ultimately, if you shade this right side, you're going to take up the middle one here. But then if you're going to shade the other side of it, are you just going to cut yourself off of 1 extra pixel? Because obviously, imagine this one was black and then this part was white. our black side would just be like, would take only one pixel, and then the white side would take two parts. That's very uneven, not very pretty, which is ultimately why we choose to use 4 pixels instead. Okay. For isometric tiles, standard will usually be 32 by 16. I'm going to say like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. This isn't a good representation. I think I. Okay. Nope. Okay. This isn't the exact the nice representation I'm looking for. The standard is 32 by 16 or 64 by 32, but you are not limited to these, which is why this looks fine. But like I said, standard is just like what people usually use. As long as you use a 2 by 1 ratio, which this is the 2 and this is the 1, or specifically this square here, the 2 or the 2 by 1, that will probably give you this will probably give you the most common and good isometric scaling. Okay, last thing to go over is just process on how to make pixel art. It's honestly not that deep. You guys think I honestly thought that pixel art was going to be like really like precise and specific on how we approach things, and honestly, it's the same thing as number 1, or I think this one's probably the most unique step. If you're going to work in isometric, make sure you mark out the bounds of what you want to draw in, and then you just do a basic sketch over it. You do not care about outlines at that point. Just a very simple base sketch, and then you just do. And then after that, you actually choose the size of, like this one wants to extend the illustration upwards, so you then take the isometric, you take perspective lines and actually line it up and do a basic outline. Very similar to how you would just draw in real life. You take a sketch and then you refine it. Afterwards, you would more or less take that illustration, color it, put some shading onto it, maybe some anti-aliasing and whatnot, and ultimately you just get your final product. It's honestly not as daunting as you think. Other than that, that is the end of the pixel art workshops. I apologize and am very thankful for you guys bear with me as I try to read my grammar in my own speech. Okay. For next time for our EGADS events, we are doing another Dev Nights. This is our last Dev Nights of the year. For Dev Nights, we do work on horror games. We are working on a horror game with other EGADS members. You are free to join us. This is going to be our last one of the semester, but we are doing it again next semester. We are still working on the same project, and there are a bunch of mentors and leads that will help you guys. So there is no, like, you have to be this experienced to help us with the game. No, you are free to join. No skill required or skill requirement, because we're going to ultimately teach you. This will help you, like, just build out your resume even. We are doing a social. This is our last social of the year. We are going to Cidercade. I'm pretty sure, yeah. So for our Cidercade social, I don't think the form has been released yet. But whatever we do, fill out the form, and it is a paid social, but we are covering food and rides. Okay, and then lastly, over the winter break, we are doing our annual EGAS Mega Micro Jam. Basically, for the Mega Micro Jam, we are doing a WarioWare series where you guys are building very small mini games, and this is also a week-long game jam. You guys can take your damn time on it. These small little short mini games, though, they're like 6 to 7 seconds long. You're not committing a lot of time or resources into this very light Mega Micro Jam. But we're gonna take everybody's 6 to 7 very small mini games. We're gonna compile them all together into make one big endurance game. So, and this year we are having a deer mascot, and every year for our Mega Micro Jam, we have a hidden theme associated with it. So it's not gonna be it's gonna be as exciting as like it's gonna be more exciting than you think. And we also have a project team for our Mega Micro Jam. If you want to join the project team to actually, like, once we are done hosting the Mega Micro Jam, everyone on the project team is going to compile it and do code, make some illustrations midway and basically help build the actual game itself. If you want to join the project team, it is going to be in the form. If you go, I believe the Micro Jam, the Discord is live. It should be somewhere in our announcements. If you join that Discord server, there's going to be a forum attached in like somewhere in the announcements. You fill out the form just to sign up, but in the form there's also a separate join the project team form where then it'll take you to another forum where where you'll sign up to be part of the project team. You're building a game and another game, a game within a game. This is gonna be like this is our second EGAD's hosted game jam. So if you guys are interested in doing more game jams, you know, have another round. This is, if anything, this is probably the lightest, a very light rendition of our annual Texas Game Jam. Other than that, that is all for this art workshop. Thank you guys for coming, and I hope you guys have a great winter break.